I assume you know what a traditional union is. Dating back to the industrial era, workers united to challenge exploitation and substandard workplace conditions. And unions have had a close relationship with the left of politics here and around the world ever since. There are other bodies, and they've been called professional associations or something similar. Either way, they're fundamental parts of politics and workplaces today. Except that when it comes to unions, very few Australians are members of a union today. Union membership is at a pretty low ebb, around about 11% of the workforce, depending on who you speak to. It may have lifted to 12% now, I'm not quite sure. So is it surprising that a new model of union has sprung up? Here in Queensland, an umbrella group called the Red Union appeared on the scene, offering lower membership rates to nurses, teachers and some others. It's called the Red Union, at least that's the umbrella organisation. The Red Union has links to the right of politics. And the Labor state government has targeted them in state parliament in no uncertain terms. Let me play you a nibble of some of the fairly blunt things that have been said by Labor state members about the Red Union and its founders here in Queensland.
We also noticed that the member was up there talking to the Red Unions and obviously them puppeteering him and giving him the speech that they needed to deliver.
You may remember a gentleman named Graeme Haycroft. He's the founder of that pretend front door for a law firm called the Nurses Professional Association of Queensland that runs around tricking workers into effectively signing up to get some legal advice they could get much more competently and much cheaper somewhere else.
It was suggested that registered organisations should compete for membership and, like businesses do, in the open market. I remind the House that registered employer and employee organisations do not operate for profit. Their role is to represent their members' interests. In the committee process, it was suggested that these amendments are targeted at so-called unions who are not registered under the Act because they are not politically affiliated to the ALP. These so-called unions also purport to be not aligned to any political party. Both of these propositions are false. Firstly, these changes are predicted on enhancing effective representation of workers and employers in Queensland's IR system and ensuring rogue entities who misrepresent themselves are held to account. Secondly, those who have set up and run these so-called unregistered unions in fact have deep and enduring links to the LNP. And I take that interjection. How does anyone know how many members they have? They have no accountability whatsoever.
And it goes on and it goes on over a period of time. The last voice there you heard was Grace. Now, the state government passed legislation to deliberately shut out the Red Union associations from being registered as an industrial organisation under the bill. And as a result, they can't technically represent their members before the Queensland Industrial Relations Commission. So what is the Red Union Group? Are they a union or are they something else entirely? Well, you heard the name Graeme Haycroft. Graeme Haycroft was named in state parliament. In fact, multiple times he's been named in state parliament. So I interviewed Graeme Haycroft and I asked the founder of the Red Union organisation to explain what was the original concept, what led to the starting of what they call the Red Union.
The current structure really sort of was formalised about 1907, I think, with the Industrial Relations Act, where the unions were granted a monopoly of representation of workers. So each union had its own category of workers that they could represent. And the same thing was done for employers, by the way. So it wasn't, and this became the sort of the funding mechanism of the political system in Australia. And from 1907, when there were certainly nowhere near a majority of Labor Party members at that stage, 3 years later, Fisher was the Prime Minister, the Labor Prime Minister. So it worked. It worked.
So you set up, or you thought, why don't we set up a union, a modern union, and call it the Red Union?
Well, the name came later. I was approached by a bunch of nurses who were just friends of ours, and they were saying, "Well, why don't you you're sort of retired, Graeme, or retiring? Why don't you start a new union? We're sick of this one." And that's really where it started.
Oh, they were sick of the Queensland Nurses Union.
Yeah, yeah. Over a barbecue, they said, "Why don't you do that?" And I thought, well, it could be an interesting project. I was made enough money doing what I was doing, and I thought that could be an interesting project for a couple of years to work out how it's done and then maybe set up. Yeah.
So when you finally established the first of the sort of the union bodies underneath sort of the umbrella of the Red Union, how many members did you start with?
Oh, we started from none. We had no nurses, and by the end of the first year, I think we had 200. That's about all. So a very slow start. Had to write the constitution. It was just the nurse union at that stage. We didn't start the teachers until about 2017 or something, 18.
Okay.
In that order.
All right.
And the others got thrown in together, and the red bit actually came from because the ALP had the colour red. And I was looking for posters and brochures that would stand out. I said, well, we'll just have red brochures. That's our colour.
So how many members does the Red Union have today in 2024?
Well, last week it was 19,000, just under 19,000 in Australia and just another 200 or so in New Zealand. I haven't checked today's figure, but my guess is we should be over 19,000 in Australia. And that breakup's about 13,000 nurses, about 3,000 teachers and a couple of thousand others.
Now that's significant membership in my mind. What sort of union categories make that up? So there are different sort of strands for nurses, for teachers and for others. What are they, Graeme Haycroft?
Well, as I said, there's 13,000 nurse members, roughly, about 3,000 teacher members. Most of the membership's in Queensland, but the membership's growing in the other states now. And then there's the medical AMPS, Australian Medical Professionals Society. It's still got under 1,000 members, and there's an Independent Workers Union, which has basically got the balance, and that's it.
Why have people joined your union, inverted commas, as opposed to the traditional, historical, industrial unions of Australia, at least in Queensland?
We're cheaper, one, and remember that the union membership market really, there's only about 6% of people that will actually pay and join and pay with their own money a membership. So every other membership has got some overarching factor, like in nurses, it's the need for professional indemnity insurance, and for teachers, it's the appalling situation they get into if they have any problem with parents or kids. They're just left alone. So
they need some sort of insurance, general insurance cover.
Essentially, we're running an insurance business. People pay a membership fee, which is like a premium. In return for that, they get a set of services, including the nurses, for instance, and teachers. They get professional indemnity insurance thrown into that package. But, people have problems all the time, especially in the public sector, appalling management. So they look to us to sort them out.
So what can your type of union do for members?
Basically do the stuff that unions do, but better and cheaper. And there's no politics, because how much we charge.
There's no politics in your union structure.
Well, there's no party politics.
Right.
I mean, one would argue that it's all political.
Mm-hmm.
We've got.
So you're not aligned with the LNP or a particular branch of one side of politics or the other.
Well, no, we're not. I'm actually still a member of the LNP. Shame on me. Because every day I think, God, why? But there's got to be some changes in the LNP if they're going to be a Conservative party. But that's a side issue. One of the reasons we've been successful is that we don't involve that. We don't give any money. We don't give any specific support. We only look after the members, which makes it a lot easier internally because we don't pull any punches.
So the Red Union, with your now nearly 20,000 members in Queensland and elsewhere, does not give any money at all to one side of politics or the other.
Correct. None at all. In fact, I wrote the Constitution, and the Constitution bans it. I mean, you can't actually ban people from doing it because they just go ahead and do it. But there's penalties built into the Constitution. If anyone did try and do it, the members would all find out about it. And hopefully they would then say, well, stuff you were leaving.
So Graeme Haycroft or Jack Maguire or any one of sort of the office holders in the Red Union can't ring up, the LNP or the Labor Party said, we're going to give you $100,000 from our membership fund, what have you. Can't happen.
Can't happen.
Right.
Well, in the first place, we don't collect it. in the first place. That's going back to our original point about monopoly. We charge about $4.50 or $60 or something for a full-time membership of nurses. The QNMU charges $760 or something. So the difference is we don't have the difference. They can use the difference. They don't actually give the money to the ALP. They are the ALP.
My guest is Graeme Haycroft from the Red Union. This is ABC Radio Brisbane. Steve Austin's my name. The state government has made a number of legislative moves to try and box you out of being a registered industrial organisation under Queensland legislation. And they have slammed you in state parliament. Grace has lampooned you. In fact, Grace, Mick de Brenny, other members of the state government have done everything but blow raspberries in your direction, called you fake unions, all sorts of things. Why is that, given that you're representing workers and providing insurance coverage in their occupation field? Why is it that the state government of Queensland hates you, Graeme Haycroft? It's
very simple. It's money. It's not, I just mentioned before, the difference between our nurse fees and the QNMU, but it's actually a lot more than that. It's around about $500 per member, because there are economies of scale. We're at the sort of the 20,000 mark level, and it costs about $400 to provide that service. There's a bit left over. When you get to 40,000, you only need about 250 to 300 per member per year, because the nurse union in West Australia charge 300. They're cheaper than us. And if Jack and I were running the QNMU in Queensland with 60,000 members, there would be change left over from 200. It doesn't cost that much. Now, the reason they don't like us is that every member that joins our Red Union group is $500 that doesn't get used or doesn't go to the ALP in support. They don't actually send money. The QNMU's got 170 or 200 employees or so. Jack and I could run the QNMU with maybe 50 or 60 people. There's not 100. They're basically working for the ALP. And hang on, I've got no objection to that. That's fine if that's what they want to do. But that now you know why they don't like us, because if we pick up 1,000 members, there's 500,000 that doesn't go to them. What can you do for your members? Because the state government has effectively shut you out of the industrial relations system of Queensland. Well, not quite. Not quite. They've made a pretty good. Pretty good. Can you appear before the Industrial Relations Commission? No, but the Red Union law can. We've started our own law firm. So that, what are they going to do and say, well, we don't like that particular law firm? They may do that, but let's see them do it. What we've done, I think, is we've changed the narrative. I mean, the real problem in health, and the same in education, is what I call the bureaucratic overload. And, for every 10 nurses, there's 5 bureaucrats. For every probably 10 teachers, there's somewhere between 3 and 5 bureaucrats. You probably need 1 bureaucrat per 10. Now, the only way you're going to get that change is you've got to change the system. In other words, you've got to make hospitals locally autonomous. We don't have to, but this is a good way to do it. And you have the Cairns Hospital, for instance, runs itself. Just the only thing it gets from Brisbane is money. The same with schools. There's no major education problem now, because it's a function of the bureaucracy. All these crazy rules and recommendations. This is what happens when you've got a disconnected bureaucracy. There's no way any school and the teachers and the board of a school, or the parents involved in any way, would ever come up with the stuff that's going through Parliament now, in the education sphere. It just wouldn't happen. So our narrative is we're going to take on the bureaucracy and point out that you either have a professionally paid and well-funded teaching and nursing staff, or you have a massive bureaucracy. You can't have both. So that's what we're doing. Graeme Haycroft from the Red Union is my guest. This is ABC Radio. During, or in the sort of the whole process, the drama of the pandemic and the lockdown, the Red Union has ended up representing a number of health employees and teaching employees, and I think police and others possibly, who didn't want to have the mandated COVID-19 vaccine.
and you actually pursued that matter legally.
Yep.
Was that in the interest of members, or at the request of members, or some other reason?
Well, we had 2,000 of our members who had paid to join us, and so we didn't pull any punches. We went after it for them, and it's been a drain on the resources of the, if you like, of the enterprise. But in my view, it's been well worthwhile. People can join us now knowing that we won't pull any punches. We say we'll do something, we bloody well do something. I'd like to pursue a class action. We've got 2,000 nurses who are effectively sitting there. They want to come back to work. The government is saying, we want you to come back to work. But everyone's got a little little note on their file saying that they've acted in such a way that they can't be re-employed.
Queensland Health and the Minister, Shannon Fentiman, denies that.
Well, they may well deny it, but it's on their record. And that's what we've seen it. So we've got the correspondence to say, sorry, you can't be employed because of you breached the rules at the time. Now, so normally you think, well, that'll be the end of that, but they're not. So, and there's about 1 million reasons why the government's taking that view. $500 per member by 2,000, $1 million. $1 million.
So you think that the reason that the state government has taken a range of actions to change legislation that would appear to be trying to box your union, the Red Union, out, is because you're in competition to the traditional industrial unions and you're simply attacking the base of, in this case, the Labor Party in Queensland as a result?
That is it entirely. It's all about money.
And in its essence, but your point is that you, despite you being a bewildered member of the LNP, not 1 cent of the Red Union's money goes to any political party in Queensland whatsoever.
Correct.
How do you describe the situation here in Australia where industrial unions work hand in glove with the Labor Party here, say in Queensland? How would you frame our situation here?
The system is set up to create monopolies for the unions, to generate money for the ALP. I mean, the real problem isn't the ALP, it's the LNP, who are innumerate. They can't understand how any of this works. They don't know how the money works at all. Sorry to have to say this about them, but they just don't understand it. But they do understand.
Well, the LNP keeps complaining about union involvement in elections here in Queensland. Why can't they add up, Graeme Haycroft?
God save us. I don't know why. I do know why. They are terrified of the unions. And what they're specifically terrified of is 300 or 400 union-paid activists arriving in their electorate 6 weeks before an election and canvassing the area twice. Now, they do that almost every election somewhere in the country. This happens. You work construction just to remind the LNP politicians, get close over the target and tap up on the shoulder, and this will happen to you. No one else will come out outside of Parliament. They all say it under parliamentary privilege, but they won't say it outside. They should be simply saying, well, all workers should be allowed to be represented by whoever they want, and every worker should have exactly the same access to the law, irrespective of who's representing them. I mean, this latest legislation, ostensibly against us, has just disenfranchised 2.5 million workers in Queensland. This is the workplace health and safety stuff. Unless you're have to be an existing member of a registered union, you can't get any help or support if you have a workplace health and safety incident. You're now excluded from this entire, very important set of laws. But hey, if they're going to try and put us out of business, is more important than 2.5 million workers. But where's the very hard to get anyone from the LNP to sort of go to what is essentially a cultural argument and argue, hang on, this is really wrong, which is a cultural thing. So we've got a long way to go, Steve, long way to go.
Graeme Haycroft, the founder of the Red Union, which is an umbrella organisation that takes in a range of teachers, nurses and other medical professional groupings under that banner. Marty says, I'm a member of a professional association and I have to be a member to pay the $500 fee. Otherwise, I have no work, as it's mandatory, or no licence to work or have a business. It's a rort and nothing but a rort, says Marty. I believe workers' unions do a lot more for their members.